Lord saw to give us time off. 28 was the last day. And during that time, what we did, we discussed, we were talking about numbers. We're dealing with the chapters 22 to 24, 25. We're dealing with one of those famous names in the Bible, which was Bela. Okay? One of the characters in there. And as we were looking at that, and we're going forth and seeing, we're seeing how Israel is preparing as they will venture on to move forward, but yet they're still wandering in the desert, in the wilderness, because of something that they had done. Because God wanted to what? To weed them out, yes? Yeah. And so I just put a couple of highlights in here. Like I said, it's always a guided discussion, and it, works real good with participation from y'all out there. And these key points that we want to do is a slight reminder that when we dealt with Baal, Baal was a prophet. Was he a good prophet? Was he a bad prophet? Was he God's prophet? What's the answer to that?
He was a prophet for hire.
A prophet for hire. In other words, he was a prophet for hire, and that was the way of Balaam. Okay? Balaam was a prophet for hire. What did he do? He did it for his own what? Gain. Okay? And that's what we discussed in chapter 22 was he was for hire. And now all we did was the king, Balak, saw what? He saw this bunch of numbers, okay? These people coming towards him, invading his land, and therefore he sought to do what? Stop him how?
He asked Balaam to put a curse on him.
Put a curse on him. Okay? He wanted to, right? But he asked Balaam to put a curse on him. Okay? And did God give him permission?
No. He did the opposite.
What did God do? Tell me.
Bless them.
Told him you can't curse my people.
Stood in his way.
What's that?
Stood in his way.
God stood his way. Oh, are you talking about the Lord, angel of the Lord?
Mhm.
Oh my God, right?
God told him not to,
Okay.
but I was there. I got a little confused.
Okay, no problem.
He
That's
told
right.
him not to, but then he told him
To go. But to go and say these words that I put in your mouth, right? Okay. But before that happened, we know that we had went into one of the other characters in there was the talking donkey. Okay. Which had more sense than Balaam himself, okay? Because he wore them in there. But see, he was for hire, and they offered him certain things. And that king up there, Balak, he said he put up about 21 different altars out there. Okay? And we also saw that at the time, what happened was there was 8 oracles that Balak tried to put upon the people. Okay? Or 8 different curses that he tried to put on. He found that he cannot curse God's people because you cannot go against God. And so that still was the way of Balaam. Now the other part, it was the error of Balaam. What was the biggest error of Balaam? Balaam.
When God had told them not to do something, but when they kept enticing him with different treasures and stuff, his heart was kind of letting him go see, but that's what got him in trouble, the desire of his heart and not following what God had said.
Again, that he was a prophet for hire, right? And that he believed that was the way, and understanding that his error was that he, as we saw foot, was his lifestyle was he was a what? Soothsayer. Okay? A prophet for hire. But his way that we had here, the understanding that the error of Balaam was this right here. In other words, when you go to that, you have to go to Jude 11. And we did that, right? Last time we went to Jude 11. Because that was what? Prophesizing against what? Was telling us against what type of teaching? False teaching. Okay? And his way with there, understand his error was not only that he was thinking that he could disobey God and get away with it, but he was thinking that he could entice those to sin and also get away with it. That was the error in his. In other words, he didn't believe in the righteousness of, the unrighteous being saved. Okay? And that's what it was done. So he was a false teacher, and Peter talked about that also. Not only that, but Peter brought it up also at the same time we talked about Jude there. But then we talk about the doctrine of Baal. Now, this one here comes to this part here. Everybody heard about the Roman Empire, right? It rose and it fell. What caused the Roman Empire to fall? You say God, but what?
But they're
They're boldness.
Go ahead.
Just like us, they're rotting from within.
Thank you. Dennis, thank you.
Who else is there?
Dennis is. Yes. A chair that was up here. And I did not see it. So we'll move it over here. Mhm. I know, so. Yeah. But he what? They were rotten, the Roman Empire rotted from in. So Balaam figured out he couldn't curse them, so that he said he would what? Entice them. He would work from inward out to rot them in. And what was the part? Everybody turn to, I think it's 25. 24, 25. The chapter 25. What was it that he did? He said, I cannot get them to what? I cannot curse them, but I can cause them to what? Numbers 25, I'm getting that. What did Israel start to do? It tells you there in first verse. First verse of chapter 25. What did Israel start to do? Somebody read it.
Section 25:1.
Yeah, just 25:1.
While Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women.
Moabite
women,
Go ahead, keep going.
who invited them to the sacrifices to their gods. The people ate and bowed down before these gods.
And read the rest of that. Last verse 3.
So Israel joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them.
So what did he do? He enticed them to take and commit that which was around. They were in Moab. Okay? And so they doing what? They started doing what? Worshiping other gods. They started doing sexual immorality and all this. Okay? And that's what caused the rot from in. Yes, come on.
I know this is backpedaling a little bit, and you may have covered it, but a lot of times when we look in the Old Testament, we know that God doesn't change, right? The
Right.
scriptures teach us that. So we can learn a lot about how God deals with his people, like all the time. He doesn't change.
Mhm.
But I had a challenge when I was looking at in chapter 22 when Balaam first went to God, right?
Right.
Because they asked him, he went to God, and God told him no. God told him no,
Right.
don't go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then Balaam went back to the messengers
And told
and told them what God has told me no. And they sent word back to the king. The king sent more people. The
Right.
scriptures say they sent a greater amount of people.
Mm-hmm.
So Balaam then, as if he forgot what God said, as if the amount of people that came to ask him was going to change God's mind, he says, okay, let me go back and see if God has something else to say. And then he goes to him, and then God is almost like God changed his mind, because he said, okay, if they come in the morning, go with them, but only say what I tell you to say.
Mm-hmm.
Then, when he goes with them, verse number 22 says, God was angry
Yes.
that he went. So looking at, this is Bible study, the challenge was,
Go ahead.
I know God don't change his mind, but
No.
why would the scriptures tell us God got angry with him after he told him he could go? What, did God not change his mind? And maybe because Balaam was just persistent, God was like, okay, I know what I told you to do, but you're gonna do how you want to do. What do y'all think about that?
Well, it just goes to say that God is directing the affairs of the world. Was not God angry with the wicked when Jesus was crucified?
Mm-hmm.
For
And
sure.
God- And God was directing the affairs of the world, okay? Was he not angry with Nebuchadnezzar?
Mm-hmm.
And he paid, though he said, Nebuchadnezzar, my king, has carried you away. Ultimately, God said, I caused you to be carried away.
Mhm.
But he used the wicked king to do it. And so still, even though God is directing the affairs of the world, he raised them up that he may display his power through them. And so he did with Caleb and Balaam.
Okay, so not to take away time, we know, in his sovereignty, Al, you're right. He directs the affairs of the world. We know that. The only thing that was a challenge is for me in my mind. I'm like, it's one thing for God to direct the affairs of the world, meaning he's not surprised by anything people do. It's not going to change his providential plan. But I'm saying in this instance, he specifically said, "Don't go," and then turned around and said, "To go." Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Right.
but
Right.
in his going, was he going to glorify God or was he going to glorify himself? Because when those men came again, he could have said refused to even see them,
True.
but yet he heard what they were saying, and I think the fact about the treasures that they would give him took his mind off of what God said, and his desire was growing for that treasure. And in doing that, I think his mind was more on himself than what God had said to him.
But he did say, in 18 that though Balak was to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord. And then the Lord had told him to go, but the Lord told him that you're going to speak what I want you to speak out of your mouth.
But the question, but you're right. But what Lamar is trying to say is that did God change his mind or whatever? But now said no. This is God is what ruling the affairs of the world, the hearts of those around him. Because look at verse 20. I see what you're saying, Marius. In verse 21 it says, Balak rose in the morning, saddled a donkey, and went with the prince of Moab. Okay? Because in 20 it said God came to Balak at night and said, if you men come to call you, rise and go with them, but only the words which I speak to you that you shall do. Now, that's the key. Only the words I speak to you, you shall do.
Yeah. But he doesn't say he got angry because he spoke something differently.
He got angry
said
because
he got angry because he went.
Right. And
I don't want to take up too much Bible study. I just want to
like
see
Lita
that.
said, is that what? When you look at the rest of the chapter and look at what's going on, he's not doing what God said. Yeah, you have to go with the rest of the chapter in 23 and 20. He's not doing what God says. Because even he had to brought the angel of the Lord that says right there, the angel of the Lord took him to stand in his way and adversity against him, and he was riding a donkey and had two servants with him. Okay? In other words, he stood there because he was trying to get a point across, that, hey, I'm letting you go, but I'm angry at you because you're going. But you not need to say what I'm going to say. But he already knew that he wasn't going to say what he wanted him to say. Because what? He was there to encourage. Go ahead. Say again?
Because God already knew what was in his heart. And
Right.
what was in his heart was not,
Of course.
he just wanted the okay to go from God so he could do what he wanted to do and not what God wanted him to do. And that is why God was angry with him.
And ultimately, who brings blessings? Who brings curses?
God. I will bless who I will bless, and I curse who I want to curse. Okay? And no matter what Balak wanted to do, Balak wanted him to curse him. Even when we looked at that, he tried to curse him, and what he did, he blessed him. By trying to curse him, he blessed him. And that's where we led to hear the doctrine of Balak, that if you can't do it from outside, you must go inside, as Dennis said, to rotten them out. And that's what's main when you start looking at that. What happened? Is the church affected from the outside or from the inside out? Just like any government, it's affected from what? The inside out. It rottens that way out. It's just like this. Who came up against Jesus? His own people. Okay? What did you say? What did you say, Gideon? The government.
It was, but you know what?
What?
He said it was a friend that lifted his heels against me.
Yes, a
Someone
friend.
within his own circle,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Judas.
Uh-huh. And see,
They needed somebody from the inside the 20 miles.
that's the doctrine of Baal. That's the whole doctrine right there. Okay? Because anything that happens, it's like the church itself is going to be ruined from false teachers, which are from within. Okay? In other words, it's going to be, that's why God said, do not try to separate the wheat, the tare from the wheat. Okay? You don't know it. He does the separation, but still, we have to be on guard for those, what? Wolves in sheep's clothing. Right? And so that's what we had there. Anything else on Mr. Baal, the prophet? But when he did this part here, the doctrine right here, God did what? Back to chapter 25. God did what? What happened in verse 4? Who's reading for me?
The Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of these people, kill them, and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel.
So, God punished them, right? He told Moses to do what with them? Cut them off. And how many did they take out? 24,000. 24,000. You'll see that number, and you'll see that when we get into chapter 27, as we go, there are points, you see different things, because that affects the numbers in the census. 24,000. Now, was God wrong for doing that? Good point there. God is never wrong. Okay? But that's what we had when that's what key points I saw in chapter 25. Because what Balak tried to do is rock them from inside, and he did get some to go with in their way, and God cut them off. Punish them. Yes, Dan.
Did he kind of do it like going through the back door? So he couldn't curse them, but he calls, it says in Revelation 2 here that.
2:14?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, and he says that he calls Balak to cast a stumbling block, get him to eat things that sacrifice unto idols, and then to commit fornication. So he was like doing an end around to get it done or something?
Who, Balak?
Balaam.
Yeah, that's what did the end around.
Couldn't curse him, but he could entice him.
He said, King, I cannot do this. I cannot, every time I go to curse them, they're blessed, okay? We can't do this from this way. We have to do it. Put a stumbling block by going inside. Okay, the back door, as you said.
Which caused God to punish his people.
Right, because they fell for it. Okay? It caused them to punish them because they fell for it. Now, think about this. All this time, they've been wandering in the wilderness because of what? Disobedience and unbelief. They've been whittled down, all this, right? And then they fall because this will always happen. The doctrine will, because it, like I said, it end around, you don't see it coming, right? It's there, and then it blossoms out. Thank you, Jim. That's a good point. In Revelation 2:14. Because that's exactly what he's talking about right there.
You know, and Corinthians,
Hmm.
I'm not on that Corinthians today. You want it? Okay. Talks about the things of the Old Testament were written by example.
Mm-hmm.
Some things happened there that could have been left out, but the Holy Spirit deemed necessary to lead the prophets to write this in the book so we can see by example. Now, the Bible talks about worship. We talked about it Sunday. We talked about non-believers and believers worshiping together.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when they run into these Moabite women? Not only they're with the women, but they have brought their gods with them, you know? And, you know, we can mimic this as we talk about how a believer should marry a non-believer.
Right.
You know, the same thing happened to Solomon. You know, he brought all these concubines over, and when these concubines come over, guess what else they bring? They bring their gods, and he had them put them around the temple and stuff. So this is just pointing out an example of why this was left in the Old Testament for us to see. This is what happens when the church mixes with the world. You know, because the world is going to bring this stuff with it.
And like you said, also, we discussed here, we don't worry too much about, the world, yes, comes in, but then they work from the inside to get it all messed up. And then that's why we have to be discerning.
Who live among you.
Who labor among you, yes. And I like that part where you said that, because that's when he read the 25:2, it said they invited the people to the sacrifice of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. A little g, but bunch of gods. In other words, that's the idolatry that was happening. That's the harlotry that was going on. And that's what caused this whole situation. And that's the example that God left in there, like I said, for us to see.
And it was the women that enticed the man to accept this. And all throughout the Bible, we see that the women of this nation, they followed the lead of the men.
Mm-hmm.
And so even the women in the nation of Israel, they accepted what the men accepted because they considered the men to be, you know, following God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when the men start sleeping with these different women, it just goes to show that the weakness can come from an emotional attachment, you know, or pleasure. Because with pleasure comes sin. I mean, look what happened to Samson. You know? Yeah, look what happened with Adam and Eve.
Well, that started right there.
Yeah. But the thing about it is
I decided to rule over you.
yeah, the man was the lead into sin. You know, even though the woman gave him the fruit, he was the lead into sin.
What are you saying over there? Don't do it.
And so much so, it's like, they probably would have said if they'd have had time, God, it's those women you gave us that made us do it. You know, I mean, that's what Adam said.
That
That's
woman
what
you
Samson
gave
said,
me.
That woman that allowed her to look so pretty.
That woman you gave
Yeah,
me.
but even in saying that, he blamed God.
Right, so it just goes to show just the ways of man, if they're not rooted and grounded, as Numbers is teaching, walking with God. If we're not walking with God, these things are bound to happen. These were God's people.
Yes.
Real God's people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so these things were written for our example, even though we're God's people. It can very well happen to us. We're not walking with God in the way of His word.
Think about that. I like the part you said walk. See, that's that progressive sanctification that you're going forward. Okay? But they've been walking with him how many years? Almost 38 years now, walking with him. Right? They walked against him, now they had to walk with him. And he had to guide them around. But he was teaching them and trying to give them rules and regulations, laws and all that. He was doing that. But they were enticed, as we said. So that's why when, like I said, I like that part. I was looking at that. You know, it's very important that it all started in there. And we saw Jude, we saw Revelations, we saw 2 Peter. All that right there is in the New Testament talks about him and what he did and how he did it. His way, his earth, and his doctrine. All is there specifically talked about in the New Testament. It brings us back, like I said, out to the Old Testament. This is good. Okay. Anything else on him? Any other things that questions or anything? Okay. Now, let's move to chapter 26 then. If you see, I put it there, new generation. Actually, this is the new beginning, right? Because you have to go all the way down, I think it is 26, man, that's a long chapter, isn't it? 26:64. The reason I call it new generation today, read 26, verse 64 in chapter 26, someone. 64.
But among these was not a man of those who were numbered by Moses and Aaron the priest, who numbered the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai.
Right there. What is it saying? None of them from the first census were there in the second census. Okay? None of them from the first census there. And Andy likes the numbers that he has there in the census, okay? This is from the beginning. And what happens here? They're ordered to do what? A second census, are they not? In other words, first census was in chapter 1, the second census is in chapter 26. Why did he have that? Why did he have to do the second census?
Kill off that generation.
Well, they're going into Canaan, so if they're taking census of how many men they have, and at the same time, it's showing you the ones that have died because of disobedience and stuff also.
What they learned from Israel and took from there, not Israel, from Egypt. He cleansed them.
Okay. In other words, the good point that you said there is that they're now ready to prepare to enter into Canaan, the promised land. So this chapter right here is very important to what in the next 26, 27 is very important in the preparation before they go in there. Because they have to what? Number them, as you said, because they need to know the military, what the military size is now. But also a second reason. You might see that in there, the second reason they numbered them. Inheritance. The word now, when you look at the reason they had to do it second is because they had to what? They got to divide up the land once they get in there. Thank you. What verse was that? Here you go. This is just a little thing here to show you. Right here is the second census. You'll get one. Oh, but you got one. I know that's cool. But so there was two censuses. We already decided one was to make sure what their military prowess was, and also when you look at verse 65 and 64, it tells us that none of them in this number, because Moses called who, not Moses, but God called who to make the number change this time. Because Aaron's gone, is he not? Aaron's dead, right? Aaron's with the Lord, let me put it that way.
That's 26.
Caleb?
That's 2652.
Yeah.
What you asking about as far as the size, the land being issued based on the size of it.
Right, in other words, they had to do this, they had to number them in order to what? To divide the land up, to move them forward, and do the census and do that. So they had to do that so they know how to divide the land up. Now look at these numbers here. Now I put the first three names in red for a reason. Okay. I'm not going to go through all, read everything that's in the chapter, but you can see right here, in this right here, is that Reuben, who else? First three. Reuben. Yeah, right, in red. Why? Because Simeon lost 63% of his people. Died. 63%. Now, why would I mention these three right here? If you look at your chart of the layout, they were on the southeast side of the camp, was they not? Right? Now, remember there was a rebellion that happened? Still with me? To rise up against Moses, right? And therefore, that they were some people. What was the name of the guy that led that? Y'all remember? Start with the K? Korah. Korah. Okay. Korah. And everybody with Korah, when they led up, God did what? Swallowed them up, right? But he did not kill off all of Korah's people. He had two sons that survived. Y'all remember that, right? It's in there. Okay. But because they rode up against them, they lost a majority of the people, especially Finland. Okay, 63%. Now, I can't tell you the other part which struck me here is that there is one in there that increased 64%. Who was he? What tribe was that? Manasseh. Now, who did Manasseh belong to? Who was his father? He's Joseph's son. Ephraim. Okay. But I can't tell you why they did that. But this right here just gives you a layout of how many people got lost. And to me, when you lose 22,000 people, 37,000 people in the tribe. Now you also notice in this census they did not count who? Levi. They didn't count them in the first census, or at least they said he did. But they didn't count them in this census. Okay, but yet Moses and them knew the number of Levi later on, which we'll see in the chapter. But you see what I was getting at here is that the census itself, new generation, we proved that the old generation's gone, new generation's moving forward, and they had to get a number on them, and they had to divide up the land. They're not even in the conquered land yet, but they had to divide up according to the size of the tribe. In this case, it looks like, let's see, who got the biggest part here? Judah. Okay. But they divided up that way because that was the inheritance that come, and that's the way they had it. So they did it according to the inheritance. Now, anybody got any question on, let's see. I'm gonna take care of here. Now,
So Judah got the largest part?
well,
Largest number.
you just had the largest number, 76,000 left out of them. Okay, but remember, y'all remember how they broke up the camp? The camp was broken up anyway, but they divided it. It's 12 tribes, is it not?
Yeah.
13 count Levi. We didn't count them, okay? But it's 12 that have an inheritance. Why does Levi not get, Leviticans never get inheritance?
Their inheritance is the Lord.
Hmm?
Their inheritance is the Lord.
Okay.
They just like us. Our inheritance is the Lord. But they were, when the priests spread it throughout all of the lands, the sacrifices throughout all the rest of the tribe.
Yes.
Yeah, so they had Levites within all the tribes for the ministry.
Mm-hmm. In other words, while they were still growing, moving as a group before they divided up, they had to be divided out, like I said, to each one. Okay, once they inherit the land. Once the other ones inherit land, they had to go service them because they had to do with sacrifices and stuff, all that there. And that was the key. Right.
Right. Because if they wouldn't have had the priests in each one of these tribes, then nobody would have been able to speak to God on the people's behalf. Right. And so they had them in each tribe to do that. It's like having
Corpsmen in each unit.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's it. Good example. Corpsman in each unit. Without a corpsman there, you had a little problem.
The Navy have profit all over the Marine Corps.
Yeah. Is that good? Thank you for that. Good. But look at verse 57, talking about the Leviticans. Okay, we already know that the tribal inheritance is taken care of, and Amari mentioned that in 52 to 56. That's what you're talking about, right, Amari? Okay, that's taking care of that right there. It says in 52, 56, it said, then the Lord, 52 said, then the Lord spoke to Moses and said, to these the land shall be divided as an inheritance according to the numbers of names. Okay, now get down to Levi, the Levitican inheritance that you had there, because you got the tribal inheritance, now you got the Levitican inheritance. Look at what it says there in 57. Who has that? Go ahead, read 57 to 50 to 62.
These are those who were numbered of the Levites according to their families: of Gershon, the family of Gershonites; of Kohath, the family of Kohathites; of Merari, the family of the Merarites; These are the families of Levi, the family of the Libanites, the family of the Hebronites, the family of the Malachites, the family of the Mushites, the family of the Koraites. Kohath became the father of Amram. The name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt, and she bore to Amram Aaron and Moses and their sister Miriam. To Aaron were born Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar, but not Nadab and Abihu died when they offered strange fire before the Lord.
Hold on a second. Y'all remember that, right? What did they do? They decided to offer him what, fire to the Lord, and all of a sudden, boom, they were gone. They're Aaron's sons, were they not? Go ahead. 62 is where you need to go.
Those who were numbered of them were 23,000, every male from a month old and upwards, for they were not numbered among the sons of Israel, since no inheritance was given to them among the sons of Israel.
That's no inheritance was given, but yet they had to be what? Like I said, scattered. Look at verse 1. It said, look at verse it's 63. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
63?
Yeah.
Okay, these are those who were numbered by Moses and Eleazar the priest, who numbered the sons of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho.
In other words, all these numbers that came about, this is what the number that I showed you, that the total number was the difference. And the difference was Andy's favorite number, 1820. Okay, was a total difference there, as there was all there. But the key is that the Levites had to be spread out to minister to all those, because they had 12 different tribes, 12 different countries, 12 different, territories they got to cover up. Okay?
When they did the census on the Levites, they started the counting with babies a month old.
Yes.
Unlike with the rest of, they counted from 20 years old up.
Of the new generation, right?
Yes.
And also the same thing they did for the old
Right,
generation,
first
right?
census.
But they 20 years and up, because of what? They had service in the
Those were the warriors.
warriors. There you go. But the priests, because they were born as the Levites, right? They were what? Part of the priestly tribe. So they needed right from the from as soon as they were born, you were gonna be one of the priests. You're gonna work the temples, is what they're telling you. And the sacrifice and all that. Good point, Andy. Good point. Okay. And then the part there that Al brought up was very simple. It says, you're gonna scatter, fulfill Jacob. Think about this. Go to, I hate not good, but go back to Genesis 49. I want to show you about the Levites here. Okay, fine. This is 49. Again, you see how the old, even it's old for the stuff. Help y'all along. 49. And in the first thing, and what it said, these are Jacob's last words to his son. And what he's doing, he's telling this is what's going to happen when you get out there. And we're scattering the Levites with the bedtime, the death prophecy that Jacob said. It said, Jacob called his sons and said, gather together that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days. Gather together and hear your sons of Jacob, and listen to the Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength. Excellent dignity and excellency of power. Unstable as water. Remember I told you Reuben had a problem? His own father told him, you are unstable as water. Okay? You shall not excel. In other words, you're not going to amount to anything, is what they said. Okay? Because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. And Simeon and Levi are brothers. instruments of cruelty and are in the dwelling place. Let not my soul enter their council, let not my honor be united to their assembly. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. Cursed be the anger, for it is furious, and the wrath, for it is cursed. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Okay, what is it? He said what? He did. Solomon and Levi are brothers, but he prophesied that they're gonna be scattered when they do get the promised land. Okay, they're gonna scatter, but they're scattered for a reason. It has to do with priestly manhood. They're scattered through the land, the better opportunity to teach the law to each and every one of them. Okay, and again, they're not allowed to get an inheritance as we go back to 26. So you see, as God is getting them ready, the new generation, right? Census and inheritance. That's what in chapter 26 is all about. I'm dividing the land. You get the land according to the size of you. And once you're there, this is what you're going to do. And then in chapter 27, which we're going to touch on a little bit here, we get into a little issue. Okay, a little issue. Okay, it's called family inheritance. The law that had to come about. You notice I put their women's rights up there? Why would I do that?
Because they had them right there.
Oh, did they?
Yeah,
Did they?
yeah.
How?
Because usually most customs only the men would inherit the land.
Hmm.
But when they were dividing up, who would get what, the larger tribes would get more of the lands and stuff, and the smaller one would get less. But one man didn't have sons, he just had daughters.
Well, yeah, so all of them were sons except for they were daughters, right?
They were daughters. And they didn't think it was fair that their father was part of their tribes too, that they shouldn't inherit. So they went to Moses, and then Moses went to the law, and the Lord said that they were right, they should get a portion. But, well, that's like, I don't think you want to get that.
Okay.
I think the pastor is giving our answers.
I still got to discuss it. We got to discuss this. No, you're discussing this right. Look at chapter 1. Is verse 1 of chapter 27. Thank you, Sheree. You got it?
Yeah.
Who wants to read that? You're looking at that big name there.
Let's try it.
Good.
Go ahead.
The daughters of Zelophehad, son of Pepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, belonged to the clans of Manasseh, son of Joseph. The names of the daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglan, Milcah, and Tirzah. They came forward and stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the leaders, and the whole assembly at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and said, Our father died in the wilderness. He was not among Korah's followers who banded together against the Lord, but he died for his own sin and left no sons.
That's it. This was a law that was put in place that you must what? The inheritance must go to who? The sons. This brought a problem up. My dad didn't have no sons. He had us 4 or 5 daughters, right? And he named us these names. Okay. One of them, one of the names meant disease. One of the names meant motion. One of the names meant queen, and one was favorable. Okay, these were the names. So if you ever have to name your daughters, don't name them these, please. Okay.
No, you didn't.
Do I need to edit that out?
Okay. But think about this. That was a law. So what happened? There was that name. His name would not go any further. His family tree was dead right then. You ever follow what I'm saying? They didn't get no inheritance, so they were going to be among those that had to be taken care of. But they were bold women, were they not? And they wanted their rights, as they said, because they had my father had no son, so that's why I want what comes to us because father's son. Now, as Aaliyah said, they brought it to Moses. Moses said, "You have a good point." And Moses went to who?
Oh,
The Lord. Okay. And what, look at verse 6. What's he say?
And the Lord spake to Moses, saying, the daughters of Zephaniah, speak that is right, what is right. You shall surely give them a possession of inheritance among their father's brothers, and cause the inheritance of their father to pass to them. And you shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a man dies and has no sons, then you shall cause his inheritance to pass to his daughter.
Stop right there. That caused another problem to come up.
That's what those are gonna be looking for. They couldn't get it unless he had no daughters or sons.
In other words, when they put the women under the law, they were never under the law because that's part of the law. They put them under the law and say, now you in the right to inherit, right? Okay. But there was a thing that was coming about. It happens every 49 years. What was it? Jubilee. What happens when they had Jubilee? Everything does what? Everything's returned back to its family. The male family. But with this law, they could not return it back to the male family because there was no male to turn it back to. So Moses had a second problem he had to go back to the Lord with. Okay? And the second problem was this. Lord, it's great that you did this for the women here, but what happens when there comes the Jubilee and stuff like that, and we return everything back to the males of that unit, but yet there are not any males left and no inheritance because they didn't have any. So there was another fix that had to be done. Okay, another thing that had to be taken care of. And that there, look at verses, what were you reading, hon?
You want mine?
Yeah, 9.
If he had no daughters, then you shall give his inheritance to his brother. If he has no brother, then you shall give his inheritance to his father's brother. And if his father had no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to the relatives closest to him and his family, and he shall possess it. And it shall be to the children of Israel a statute of judgment, just as the Lord commanded Moses.
That reminds me of the book of Ruth. Everybody understand, ever read the book of Ruth? Why would it remind me of y'all of the book of Ruth?
Jesus prophet.
Redeemer. Okay? Kingsman Redeemer. In other words, this would happen. That's where this comes from. When it gets to Ruth, they going back to this law that was set up. And because that relative didn't want to redeem it, it goes to the next relative.
They were just ensuring that it
Stays in the family. And then ensure that, guess what in order for the women's right, remember there's a part in there, they had to marry within their tribe. They could not go outside their tribe. They had to stay and marry within their tribe. They could not go outside their tribe because then it would not do what it did. That was one of the conditions.
That was women, right?
Right.
Yeah,
That's fine. They had to stay within their tribe with their marriage.
yeah, because if they married outside the tribe and then they had boys,
Right.
then it would be pulled out and the boys married somebody back on their side.
Right.
Until they move out.
Then the land be going all kinds, like it'd be a problem. Rewards. Numbers. Wonderful. But that's that there, and then we'll get back next week. We'll go from 27.5, and then we'll probably try to figure. Well, I don't know if we'll be able to, but the rest of the chapter, the rest of the book flows because they're giving offers, they're giving this, they're giving all this, and they're preparing to go in there and take this land that God had already gave them. And they could have done that 40 years ago. They could have done it 40 years ago. But look at that as we go there. So we're still in chapter 27. Come back next week. Chapter 27, chapter 27, chapter 27. Everybody get that? Chapter 27 and moving forward. Any questions on anything that was discussed this evening? So we can now say that women had their rights given to them way back in the Old Testament. They did not. Okay? They just got a little crazy with it now.
If women live or women right.
No, the women, right, they were put under the law. Okay, and sometimes, you know, when you get some things you get when you ask for, you don't know the benefits or the not benefits of it until it hits you later. Okay? In other words, if they found someone outside their tribe, they wanted to fell in love, no, land don't go with you. Don't stay. Okay?
They kind of similar almost to like the kings and the queens,
Yeah.
where their inheritance goes to their children. And it's gotta be though,
It's gotta stay in the family.
Like the royal blood.
It's the royal blood. The royal blood. Yeah, gotta stay in the royal. It has to stay in the family.
I want you to keep wearing it now.
Well, thank you, Will, Pastor BJ, for that in-depth look at a few chapters and numbers. You know, I've made a good point. Sometimes we have improper understanding, or we forget that both blessings and cursings come from the Lord. That passage in Corinthians says that clearly. What you were talking about, it says these things happened to them as an example. They were written for our instruction, upon whom the end of the ages have come. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed that he does not fall. And the way we understand, if we stand, we only stand because of the Lord. But if we fall because of ourselves. We fall because we take our eyes off the Lord. We fall because we don't have proper understanding and maintain a biblical worldview, meaning viewing everything that we see. We talked about something being destroyed from the inside. Well, we know God has worked on us at the inside, and it's our responsibility to demonstrate outwardly what God has done inwardly. And the way we do that is continue to come together. Glad y'all that you're using your commentators and your concordances, because it will help you. It probably already has. It's nothing like wanting to know where a text is and you can't find it. Man, I know it says something, such and such, but if you have a grasp of the concordance and how to use it, it can get you in the room, right? and then the lexicon can get you in the seat. So let's continue to study. Let's continue to realize that we can boast, but we can only boast in the Lord. Thank you all for coming out tonight.